And it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
There's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello, this is Martin Willis, your host, and we don't have any news. We have no news? We have no news this evening. Well, I had a little chat with Alejandro Rojas earlier today, and he wanted to get out of the office early, and we're calling each other a turkey and, stuff like that, because tomorrow is Thanksgiving. This is Thanksgiving evening and Thanksgiving Eve, I should say. And I have a special guest. He's helped right at the very beginning of the show. Was with us for a while. It's Michael Lauck. He'll be coming up in just a minute. And he's also an author these days. We're going to be talking about all kinds of things. And he helped with the news for quite a long time and blogs as well. Thanksgiving is tomorrow. It's my favorite holiday. And I don't know why. Maybe because I can eat without feeling ashamed of it or something. I don't know what it is. I love Thanksgiving. And so I want to thank the supporters of the show, and you can support the show for as little as $1 a month up until January 1st. It goes up to $2 then. So that information is right on our website, which is Podcast UFO. You can jump in the chat room, and you can join in there, and that's, again, on the same website. You can call in, write this number down, at 603-967-4030. And please do jump in the chat room if you're listening live. And it's a lot of fun. You can pose some questions. We're looking for some interaction tonight. So we got 2 hours. We're going to be just talking about stuff. And I don't even know what we're going to talk about. UFOs, hopefully, some of it. But anyway, I am ready to introduce our guest tonight, Michael Lauck. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's weird to be on this side of the microphone.
Well, you're always on that side of the microphone, but I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't have to worry about anything this time. I don't it can all go wrong and it's not my fault.
Yeah, I'll do all the worrying for you. Yeah, you did a wonderful job. You filled in for me when I was in Russia and also when I had surgery the year before. And you have just done a great job. I know we had Whitley Strieber lined up for you. And there was technical difficulties, so that one kind of all crashed. But no, it's I actually like listening to your shows, and I had a couple of people write me emails, telling me to have you on more often. Than I think they liked you better, and I don't think I shared that with you.
Well, I mean, if you are crazy enough just to like me, I do actually have a podcast that is completely non-UFO related. But I do host a podcast about magic called the iTricks Magic Week in Review that does not come out weekly by any stretch of the imagination. But I didn't name the show. And on that, I interview magicians because that's, as you know, something that I'm very deep into. And I used to be a professional performing magician, and now I just am a hack writer about magic.
We've had conversations because I had a really close friend that was an amazing magician in San Francisco, and he passed away, unfortunately. But he would just it was almost like mentalism, because I can't really figure out how he could convince me that I was looking at what I was looking at. It's amazing. And what is the difference between, I know we're way off topic of UFOs, but what is the difference between mentalism and magic?
Branding, mainly. Honestly, I mean, a lot of the same things that are going to go into the mentalist are going to be used in a magic performance. A lot of magicians start out that way and then become quote unquote mentalists later. It's, a lot of people think that's kind of a new thing with the television show a few years ago and such. But there was a very famous stage magician back around World War II named Joseph Dunninger, who actually had a hugely popular radio show. And for everyone who ever thought it was dumb that Charlie McCarthy and Edgar Bergen had their ventriloquist radio show, he actually read people's minds and did magic on the radio. And so you just kind of left there to be like, oh, the audience is clapping, it must be real. But it was very successful, and it's been around, for a while, and it's just really kind of presentation and branding. There's a lot of crossover between the two.
All right, I promise I'm just going to tell this one situation that this guy did. And I have never been able – I've been able to understand a lot of different things. But here's what happened real quickly. I'll try to get through this real quickly. Is he sent me an envelope to a dinner party, but he said, don't open it. He said, and it was sealed with wax. He said, don't open it, just bring it with you. And so I brought it to the dinner party, and he did a bunch of different really amazing things. And then he said, oh, you have your envelope with you? And I said, yes. So he went over to a bookcase. He pointed to the shelves, and he said, pick a shelf. So I picked the top shelf. He said, grab 3 books in each hand. He said, pick a hand. I picked a hand. Then he brought over the 3 books. He said, pick a book. So I picked a book. And then he went through the pages, and he said, tell me when to stop. So I did. He goes, okay, remember that page. And I did. And the envelope was with me the whole time. No, it didn't move. And then he closed the book, and he walked over across the room, and then he said, open the envelope. And I did, and that page was in the envelope. How do you do that?
I can't tell you how to do. I honestly am in professional organizations that would throw me out for coming on the show and explaining things like that. It's that serious of a profession, you know.
Okay.
But if you do study magic, if you know what it is, I just hearing that, I can pretty much tell you how I did that if I was so inclined. But yeah, we kind of keep secrets and stuff. It's a magic thing.
All right. Okay. So now we're going to talk about that is
why am I not a skeptic like every other magician in the world seems to be? We could talk about that.
Yeah. The Randy. What was this?
Randy, Penn and Teller, Darren Brown over in England. There's a lot of very integral members of the skeptic community who happen to be magicians. And then on the flip side, we have Uri Geller.
Right, yeah.
Which doesn't really help my case ever.
Wow. So why do you suppose, because someone understands illusion and I don't want to use the word trickery, but they understand the type of illusion and all that, and so they are skeptical of things that people see and witness?
I think it's a few things. I mean, I think a lot of it goes back to the era of Houdini and the rise of spiritualism at that time. Post-Civil War America, there were many people missing husbands and sons, and there was a huge boom in people presenting seances and merely taking donations and tributes for that, and presenting, quote unquote, the spirits of their loved ones. And several magicians at the time, and to be fair, spiritualism goes back further, as does spiritual trickery, but several magicians at the time noticed that, these are actually things that I think I recognize. And busting these spiritualists became kind of a major side project of a lot of magicians. Harry Houdini, in fact, did quite a lot of work in that, and would in his show one entire act would be a lecture on false spiritualism. So it became a real popular and form of the magician's kind of sidecraft, but it also became, honestly, fairly lucrative for a lot of those people as well. I mean, Harry supposedly, and I'm going to put that in air quotes because he always had a ghostwriter, wrote books on that type of thing. And actually, later I guess it's in this next coming year, there will be a show on the relationship between Harry Houdini and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who was very much a believer. And they investigated a few things together in real life that actually happened. I think the show is going to be a little bit more like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Harry Houdini go off and solve mysteries. But in real life, I mean, they were involved with a famous spiritualist. They investigated the name's escaping me, the fairy photos that were big at the time. There's a couple movies about that. So I think ultimately it goes all the way back to that.
Now, didn't Harry Houdini, I'm pretty sure that he had some type of vow with his wife that if he passed away that he would visit her or come back to her or try to come back to her? There was some kind of code word if he was able to come back because evidently, although Harry Houdini busted a lot of things at the time, he was very desperately wanted to believe. He very desperately wanted to contact his mother. So he had arranged for a code word with his wife, and there were every year on Halloween, because that's when Houdini passed away, a seance dedicated to that. And those actually go on today. There was just one. Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the Houdini seance. Which, ironically, the big one in, I believe it was San Francisco this year, was basically presented by a skeptics group. So,
wow. We have a question already up on the message board, and let me just try to read this. I have a small computer, and it's hard to read the print here. What do you have to say about the idea of magical manipulation of the masses, like illusions created by TV media to steer collective consciousness into targeted directions, whether it be for profit or political control? Edward Bernays comes to mind. Just lost that. Norm Chomsky comes to mind. The esoteric alchemy connections as magical practice and the secret and private sex. Wow.
Well, I think there's no denying that you can use mass media to influence people. If anyone wants to argue with that, I invite you to go and spend at least 20 minutes in front of a network television broadcast, and you will find that there are these amazing short features that periodically interrupt the main programming called commercials. And that's what they're for. Also in the show, you will notice a lot of times that maybe the heroes all seem to use Apple computers, and the bad guys all seem to use no-name computers. There are a lot of techniques like that. And to tie this all the way back to another magician and a very real UFO hoax, Orson Welles was a very accomplished magician. Some people might remember that. If you're a little on the older side like myself, you might remember him doing magic on talk shows and a special or two. And of course, very early on, he kind of made a name for himself with his War of the Worlds broadcast,
I guess.
And he was known before that. In all fairness, he was known.
But that brought him up to rock stardom, really.
It did. And what a lot of people don't realize looking back is that the Mercury Theater of the Air, his radio show, was an unsponsored show. The Mercury Theater was a project he had going on in New York, and they said, hey, let's bring it to radio, and we'll have it on for a while, and hopefully it'll gain a sponsor, and if not, we'll do a few episodes, and it's the arts for the masses, and we'll feel good about ourselves. So he didn't have a sponsor and was having trouble getting one until the War of the Worlds broadcast and all the attention it got. And the very next week, it became the Campbell Soup Mercury Theater of the Air.
He was going to go. He was being sued or something. Eventually, it was dropped. The case was dropped against him. But
there were the whole War of the Worlds thing. When you start digging into it, it's there's an amazing mishmash of facts and supposed facts and I think I personally think there's a real overblown of the hysteria, reporting of the hysteria, because, people who have gone back and looked for it haven't really found much in the way of police reports anywhere for people who, were convinced that the Martians were invading. One of the things that you have to remember at the time was that radio news was a fairly new idea. And radio news was starting to bite into newspaper sales. The newspapers were not really that fond of radio at this point. And the War of the Worlds broadcast used kind of fake, for a lack of a better term, news broadcasts. I mean, they weren't fake. They were presented in a show. So it was a chance for the newspapers to jump on and go, see how radio misleads people? You can only trust us. At the same time, you have to remember that back in the 30s, there were actually radio listings in the newspaper. If you had looked in your newspaper, it would have said what was on that your local channel was Orson Welles' Mercury Theater of the Air presenting War of the Worlds. So it's not that big of a deal. What supposedly happened, what caused all the issue is that when the most popular radio show at the time went to a interlude between the kind of meat of the show, a lot of people, just like today, start tuning around. And because it was known when that was going to happen, that's kind of when the first of the fake news broadcasts appeared in Orson Welles shows. And I think that he did definitely – I think he tried to stir up trouble, and it worked way better than he ever imagined it would.
Michael, we have a little bit of a sound issue. It sounds okay off and on, but I can hear it on this side, and I don't know if you're you have a good connection?
Yeah, and I'm not having any problems hearing you.
Yeah, okay, well, it seems to have vanished right now. Let's hope it stays that way. Well, I remember you wrote a blog for our website. You've written a lot of blogs for our website, but that was one of them. You kind of explored the War of the Worlds and the aftermath and all that. You can see clips if you go, if you search around on Google and stuff like that. You can see clips, newspaper clips of different people who panicked in different ways and things like that. But, I don't know if people actually jumped out of the window like they said, or, how bad it really did get.
Yeah, I mean, I think the worst that's been found is basically, there was a man who had a heart attack during the broadcast of the show. Was that because of the show? Who knows? Even in that, will horror movies and spook shows, actually well before the War of the Worlds broadcast, maintain that they were so frightening that they were known to give people heart attacks, so we have to post, fake nurses outside to attract attention? Sure, they had been doing that for years. And a lot of, the ballyhoo that followed is definitely very reminiscent of some of the things you would see around these bigger scare-oriented magic shows. And Orson Welles definitely just wrote it and got a sponsor out of it and got to be a big name and went on from there. And because he did not want to challenge, he didn't want to challenge it. He wanted all this attention. Now now we look back, and these possibly inflated stories are what is read as fact, and and there's a whole new lore of that has built up around the idea that the War of the Worlds radio show was a cover for an actual invasion. Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. There was a War of the Worlds television show with that premise, and a few other things. So it's become pop culture due to the success of what was probably effectively just a big publicity stunt.
Uh-huh. Okay. So, time moves on, and there's the different types of media, and I know you did a blog, I believe, about movies and the influence. So a lot of skeptics will say, or it's brought up a lot, that whatever the pop culture is, whether it's movies, any type of media, that it kind of influences people on UFOs. I personally don't think that there's a lot of connections when it comes to people seeing UFOs compared to a movie. I don't see that. What's your feelings on that?
Last time I hosted, we definitely got into this with the guest. I think that it kind of goes the other way, and it's hardly scientific, but some of my examples of this are: where are the reports of stormtroopers? Where are the reports of Klingons? Mm-hmm. Go back to the 60s. And when Doctor Who first premiered in the early 60s, it was huge. Daleks were huge. If you're familiar with the Doctor Who villain alien race, the Daleks, they were so huge that there were 2 American Doctor Who movies produced starring Peter Cushing, even though Doctor Who did not air in America. And they were released in America and England both. Daleks were everywhere. There aren't that I'm aware of, and I don't see in the literature a rise of these armored, roving, metal-voiced, screeching aliens coming and screaming about extermination. So I honestly don't think I ever see that. One of the big examples always given is Close Encounters. Mm-hmm. The big-headed, small-bodied, big-eyed aliens at the end of Close Encounters, or why people start seeing that, and then Whitley Strieber's book has that image on the cover, and then people start seeing it. Well, the problem is that kind of image goes back to Betty and Barney Hill, and even earlier, much earlier. So Whitley Strieber, that image is based on what he claims he saw, and I'm not going to weigh in on that either way, but we'll just say it's what in a book that he presents as the truth. That's an image from that. Close Encounters, they were working with people who were investigating UFOs, and that's the alien they chose, because that was the alien being seen. So I think it probably has been working the other way, but it's a convenient rationalization now, because you have to explain why do people in all corners of the world see very similar things, because they shouldn't really when they're from different cultures,
right? And totally different languages, and sometimes secluded and all that. Little question up there for you, dipping back into the magic, is do you consider the paranormal at large magic?
Well, excuse me. What do you mean by magic? If you mean stage magic, no. I mean, what I do and what I've done is it's theater. It's BS, for lack of a better term. It's it's me going out and presenting a story in a little bit different way, but that's what it is. It's me going out and presenting a story using basically my own built-in special effects. Is there magic of the, and I don't mean to be demeaning for people who do believe in the magic. I'm just going to use this to kind of separate it of the Merlin the magician, wizard kind of thing. I don't know. I mean, I have never seen someone who claims to be a magician who seems to be able to do anything that impresses me. On the flip side, I think there are paranormal things, supernatural things that are not explained, that do not fall within current science, and I don't see why they can't fall under magic. I mean, I'm a long-term martial arts practitioner. I am very, very much convinced that the Chinese concept of qi, of the body's energy, is very real. I have seen it used as a weapon. I have seen it used for healing, and it breaks out of the mold of what your normal, hospital doctor is going to expect. So is that magic? The ability to manipulate your own, as of yet undefined energy in the body? Yeah, maybe that does fall under magic. So I mean, I think that there are things out there. I'll state right now, I believe in UFOs. I believe in ghosts. I believe in Bigfoot. I do not believe in the Loch Ness Monster. Yeah. We can go on.
Have you ever had any type of? This is another chat room question. Have you ever personally had any type of paranormal situation happen?
Well, I mean, I've seen lights in the sky I can't explain. I think we've talked about that on the show before, just because of the way it was a light. And it's like, that's a fast airplane in the middle of the night. That's a fast airplane that just made a right angle turn. That's not right. I've seen that once or twice. I'm going to tell a story that I don't think I've ever told anyone outside of my immediate family. It's just kind of weird. My grandma just died, so we have gone through a lot of this, and so it's just a weird time for me to tell it. But I'm going to tell it. When I was 5 or 6 years old, my great grandfather passed away, and I was lucky enough to have both sets of maternal great grandparents be alive and near me when I was growing up, and spend a lot of time with them. And my grandfather passed away. He was sick most of his life. It wasn't unexpected. I was in first grade, so I won't say that I understood everything, but I did understand that Grandpa was sick. He was going to whatever they were telling me. He was going to go to heaven. But I understood he was going to die. I remember being mad that they didn't let me go to the funeral. I remember being really mad about that. And so it goes. Maybe 3 months later, I was at my great-grandmother's house, which I frequently was, playing in the living room, and a man walked into the house who looked like my grandfather. But he stood up very straight and very tall, which was not something I was used to seeing my grandfather do because he had been sick for most of my life. He had a suit on, which I definitely had never seen my grandfather wear. And I thought it was his twin brother because he had a twin brother who lived in California. And I immediately thought, wow, this is Penn, who I've always heard about and, even written letters to, but I've never actually met him. And he walked through this hall. You could see part of the hallway from where I was and down into what should have been the kitchen where my grandmother was probably making pie because that's what she made, bread and pie. That's what grandmothers do. And I jumped up and I was very excited and I ran into the kitchen and there was nobody there. But I saw him. I saw him clear enough that there was a shadow on the wall, he was there. I heard the footsteps. I was not sleeping. I was playing with Hot Wheels. You know, it was the strangest thing, and it wasn't something where I thought, oh, it's Grandpa's ghost. I thought it was his twin brother, because he was much more robust and healthy than I'd ever seen him. But when I went in the kitchen, there was nobody there. And my grandmother obviously had no idea what I was talking about. She was a little worried for me. I think I actually ended up being put in bed because she thought I was sick after that. But, you know, I can't really explain that. I can't really, because I saw him as, like I said, clear as could be, shadow, everything. And because he had that twin brother, it never occurred to me that's like, oh, I'm seeing Grandpa's ghost or Grandpa's back. It was, oh, it's you know, great Uncle Penn. And that's something I really, really can't explain. And really, so I don't know if I saw a ghost, but I kind of feel like I saw a ghost.
Yeah. Well, I think there are a lot of unexplained things, and that really fascinate me outside of the UFO field. And sometimes I want to talk about them. And I'm just going to throw this out there. I was talking to Keith, the producer of the show, and it's possible I might do a separate podcast that will go out and be free to supporters of the show on other things besides UFOs. It's kind of like it's in the thought process now.
Just like various unexplained things?
Yeah, something
okay,
like mysteries.
I got a name. Can I name it?
Okay, sure.
All right. As a companion to Podcast UFO, Podcast WTF.
Well, there's the WTF Mark Maron. It's the number 1 or number 2 podcast in the world. He, you know, and I actually know Mark had quite an argument with him once, and he would probably come after me if he knew that if I use that. But actually, his show's grown so big now. He's on Netflix and everything else. I'm just a little guy, you know. But anyway, he's a real character. No, I don't know. I like mysteries, and I like to talk about. A few weeks ago, I talked, you know, about astronomy, and that probably drove some people crazy. But I like that type of stuff, and I want to be able to talk more freely about different things. And I don't want to go fringe at all, nothing like that. I just want to just talk about mysteries. So anyway, I wouldn't mind getting a little feedback from the listener out there. If
I'd listen. Just throwing that out there. I'd listen.
All right. Well, hey, thank you. So, Michael, let's talk a little bit. A lot of people are new listeners since I've been on the Dark Matter Digital Network, and so they may have never heard you on the show in the past. So can you just give your background, and we'll talk a little bit later about you've written a book recently, and that's going to be in the program. We're not actually having show notes, but it'll be in the show itself where people can actually explore that. But let's talk about you, your background, and also what sparked your interest. I know you contacted me very early in my show. I think I was only like 15 shows in when you contacted me.
Right. Well, and because you were looking for help. You know, that was you called out, and I said, hey, why not? What sparked my interest in it? Man, I don't know. I don't know. There's things in my life I can point to, and I think everybody's like this, and you can say, this is why I do this now. You know, I mean, I've mentioned before, I think probably, if not here, definitely other places, when I was, again, very young, probably about 7, I saw the movie Billy Jack. And Billy Jack, for people who don't know, it's a very
I saw them
early...
too.
It's a great movie that a lot of people will tell you it's terrible, but they're wrong. Billy Jack is played by Tom Laughlin, is a half American Indian, half European descent tribal police officer, ex-Green Beret, Vietnam War vet, who is just trying to protect these hippie kids who have this hippie school on reservation land from the rednecks around them.
Yeah.
Having a pretty significant Native American aspect to my family. My great grandfather I was just mentioning, he was American Indian. One of my other great grandparents was as well. So I kind of grew up with those stories and aware of the fact that we had that in our family and some of the traditions and things from that and being very aware of that. And then my father's family was barely in America, from Germany, so I kind of felt that mix between the two. And I saw this guy doing martial arts and then my parents were hippies. And it was a perfect storm. And I'm like, at that time I remember just telling myself, I'm going to learn martial arts. And I did. And I've been teaching martial arts for about 2 decades now. And then I can say that's how that happened. I can't say this is where I got into UFOs. This is where I got into. I have no real idea. I watched Star Trek when I was a little kid. I was bored by it most of the time. I was waiting for something more exciting to come on. A good part of it, because Star Trek is, low on action and high on concept in a lot of the original series.
Oh, there's some people you just really pissed off just now.
What? Hey,
the Trekkies.
I love Star Trek. I spent all day. I got a new smartwatch yesterday and spent all day figuring out how to make it look like the LCAR display from Next Generation. So, I love my Jeep has a command insignia on the back of it. I love Star Trek. But when I was a little kid, Star Trek is not it's not aimed at kids. It's not It's not Lost in Space or anything. And let's be honest. And I don't know that that's what sparked it off. There was a show. I turned off the chat room because I'm afraid that's might have been what was causing the sound issues before. So I'm not seeing the chat room anymore. So if anybody knows what this was called for sure, throw it out at me. But there was a show in the late 70s, Sunday nights, I believe, network television, because what else was there, about Project Blue Book investigators. And I think it might have been called either Blue Book or Project UFO.
I've seen some clips. I've seen some of the episodes.
Yeah, and I think the name changed in syndication as well and was different in other countries. But if anybody knows who that was or remembers that, I remember watching that as a kid, but I think even then I had already kind of, was falling on the UFO side of things. Maybe it was In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy, scaring the crap out of me when I was little. Like that's a scary show when you're like 5, man.
Project UFO, maybe?
Yeah, I think that was, if not the original name, the syndication name. I think that sounds right, because yeah. I know in some places it was called UFO, but in other places that interfered with the Jerry Anderson show UFO. So they had to, but yeah, and it was, as I recall, because I have not seen it since I was little, but it was made with the government's kind of consent and assistance, or the Air Force. And so I think they always solved it. I think it was always like Scooby-Doo. At the end, they pull the mask off and they're like, oh, you damn Blue Book investigators and your dog. And it's like, yeah, they have a film strip and a crazy whistle, and they make, fooled everybody into thinking there's a UFO. But, I just don't know. I don't know. I just am.
Yeah. Now, I just looked at it. It was running, I think, in the late 70s. So that's probably right. So anyway, if anyone wants to call in, we'd love to hear from you. It's 603-967-4030. And if you're listening live, you can jump over to the chat room, and that's at podcastufo.com. It's 2-click sign in. Michael tried to sign up, but he couldn't. I think it's the NSA was tripping you up or something.
Well, and now I tried to get on with my iPad, and my iPad won't connect to the internet, so we might be having some weird issues here. I know there have been some storms, and there's been a lot of utility work in my neighborhood, so I don't know what's going on. I'm just hoping that everything sounds right here. But I would like to, if we could take a second, explain why I stopped writing blogs, because I haven't really stopped. I just hit a terrible roadblock.
Okay. All right.
And this might anger some people too. It's the shaver stories. I had this brilliant idea one night, and I don't even remember what the last blog I wrote was, and I remember writing it. I'm like, I'm thinking about the next one. Maybe I'll read those shaver stories, and I won't research it. I'm just going to read the stories, read what was presented, and kind of say figure out a take on it, almost as if it was presented fresh for the first time, because these things have endured for 70 years. And it turns out the shaver mysteries are my kryptonite. They are killing me. They are terrible. They're, for people who don't know, back in the day,
Richard Shaver, right?
Richard Shaver started sending in these stories. Supposedly, there's some weirdness about all that, even, because the early ones say like they had to heavily edit his manuscript, and he told the story of acquiring the racial memories of these people from a past civilization. And the first story was titled "I Remember Lemuria," and it grew from there into this through many episodes, or many issues, not episodes, of amazing stories. More and more stories about the Darrow who lived under the earth and were actively eating us and working against us, and the remnants of Atlantis. And it was another thing that caused a pretty substantial flap at the time. For years, people would talk about this on the old Long John Nebel radio show. I mean, there are books about it now. People argue, people will throw out, if you listen to shows like this, every now and then you'll hear somebody throw out the Darrow like they're, a definite factor out there. So I wanted to dig into that and see what's the meat behind these stories. Plus, I love old pulp stories. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Robert E. Howard and Walter Gibson and writers like that. And I thought this is going to be awesome. This is going to be a piece of cake. But it turns out it's just pure insanity and terribly written. And it's killing me. And I think part of what it is, it's presented as if it's a real story. But that's not the first time that's been done. I mean, Edgar Rice Burroughs maintained that the John Carter stories were about his uncle. I believe, it's been a while since I read it, but I even believe that the original foreword to Dracula, Bram Stoker claims that he has all these letters. It's an epistolary novel, so it's all in letter form and newspaper. But I believe he has this thick notebook of these strange events. That's not. It was a literary device that had been used before, and then there was the language, and I think that's kind of what cemented a lot of people in was Shaver sent in this language that you were supposed to be able to divine the real meaning of words based on the sounds in them. And the magazine just prints it and says, "Oh, we've had it checked out, and it works in every language. It's amazing. It works in Chinese. It works in this. It works in that." And it doesn't. Huh. It doesn't at all. It's full of crap. And I mean, you can check that out pretty easily just by looking at Chinese being when I read that in Amazing Stories, it's like, well, let's put some of this to the test, because Chinese is a language family, and it has two really big, distinct dialects you hear of a lot: Mandarin and Cantonese. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and people will say, well, at this point, Peking became Beijing. Well, no, that's really not true. Peking is how you say the name of the city in some, mainly southern dialects, Cantonese. Beijing is the Mandarin way to say it. Same with Nanjing and Nanking and a few other things. A lot of times the two dialects are pretty close. A lot of times they're very different. If you're familiar with the famous Shaolin Temple, where Kane came from in the Kung Fu television series and all the movies with the fighting monks, Shaolin is the Mandarin terminology for that temple. In Cantonese, it's Silum. Very different word. So it's Cantonese and Mandarin are like English and German in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. You could kind of listen and kind of hear some things where, you're going to recognize stuff, and
there's some roots. Mm-hmm.
Right. And then it diverges pretty good. So if you start doing things like that, like putting in the sounds of Cantonese and Mandarin, pretty quickly the words don't, the meaning, the hidden meaning of the words from the sounds fall apart. It's pretty easy to make it fall apart in English, but you put it out there and enough people, write in and say, "Oh my God, that's amazing." I tested it in Finnish and it totally worked, and Welsh, and things that that the average reader at the time and in World War II era America is not going to be able to jump on the internet and go, "Hey, Finnish, let's try that." And there's no reason to believe that all these letter writers are even real. Because you could easily back then get away with faking a letter writing campaign of support.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so once you take apart the language and say, okay, this definitely isn't right, and then you start looking at the stories, I just don't understand why people are still following the Shaver mysteries.
Well, you have written about like George Van Tassel and Adamski and all that. You're writing a lot of times these blogs for the podcast. Is just an objective look and without judgment, and let the reader judge.
I try to sometimes, but this one, man, I can't buy it, and I can't read these stories anymore. They're trying to be crazy.
All right, move on to something else then.
Yeah, they're I mean, in the second or third story, Shaver escapes from jail with the help of the descendants of Atlantis. And at no point does anybody say, "Hey, we've been looking for this guy who was in prison, evidently for murder." That just seems like a gaping hole to me. They also theorize in another story that, I believe it's Norway was expected to be a holdout at the end of World War II. Because of the Nazi sympathetic government that had installed itself, and it just folded, boom, and that was probably because the descendants of Atlantis, working with some hardy Scandinavians who sent in a story that reads suspiciously like Shaver's writings, even though it's supposed to be written by these Scandinavians. They met the descendants of the Atlanteans and the Lemurians, and they turned on a ray that just made all the bad people in Norway die. And so the theory was that all the hardcore Nazi sympathizers died, and that's why we were able to just march right in, and that's how that there was no big battle there. And I'm like,
yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen all those World War II documentaries about the day that all the Nazis just fell over dead in Norway, but it's insanity, and I don't know. Like I said, I don't know why people are still following that one. That's definitely one I'm going to put in the no pile, and let people now call me a disinformationalist again.
Yes, that. Someone actually called you that one time.
I know. I almost had business cards printed.
You're second cousin of Richard Doty. Yeah.
You know, in digging in doing more writing the last few years, for you and for iTricks and other things and Magic, I wrote for a e-magazine called Top Hat and just other stuff. One of the things I found out is that Lauck is not as uncommon of a name as I am used to it being, and there's some notorious neo-Nazi who runs around and it's not even his real name. He adopted the name. And so I occasionally come up against that one. So yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Wow. So you had a sighting, didn't you? The lights like that we mentioned. Yeah, I know. That was such a long time ago. That was like 4 years ago.
Well, and earlier in the show I mentioned.
I know, but you just said lights. Can you describe it a little more?
I was laying on the couch watching the Jeffersons, waiting for my first child to be born and freaking out, which I think a lot of guys could kind of sympathize with that. Like just that last 3 months of the pregnancy, I was just like, holy crap, who's letting me be in charge of a tiny human being?
Yeah.
I don't even pay my bills on time half the time because I forget. How am I supposed to change diapers and feed people? It's like I just leave a big bowl of food out for the dog and let her fend for herself. And like you get weird mortality things going on, and so I was having a lot of trouble sleeping. And I remember I'm laying on the couch watching the Jeffersons. It's like 3 a.m. and there's a window right there where you can see out up high and over the fireplace window, like you will find in older brick houses. And I don't live that far from downtown St. Louis, so you see helicopters, you see things like that. The window faces the wrong way to see things going to the airport generally. So when I noticed a light zooming by once, I was like, that's kind of weird. I don't see a lot of jets at night or anything, and it was pretty fast. And so then I was paying attention to the window, and I saw another light come from the other direction, and it happened to move about halfway across my window, moving very quickly, and then just shot straight up in the air. Just a perfect right, and I was like, well, that was really weird. So I just popped out the front door and stood and, watched for a little bit and didn't quite see anything. And then just when I was about to give up and go in, I saw another one do basically the same thing. And it came streaking across the sky. And this one was fast enough. I would have said that is a falling star, a meteorite. Not unfamiliar with those. But again, it just did the right angle and went straight up. It's like, okay, that was weird. And then, by the way, I didn't go to sleep the rest of the night. I was ruined for going back to sleep.
I bet.
And I didn't see anything else. But there's not. It's. If there's an explanation for that, I'd love to hear it. I didn't see aliens. I didn't see. It wasn't close enough that I could say what shape it was. It was just a light. It wasn't leaving a trail, anything like that. But right angle more than once. It's weird. Things shouldn't do that. Things don't turn in right angles. Nothing real. Tron's motorcycle turns in right angles. That's about it. And not fast.
And there's some actual pretty good theories on, just to say if it is extraterrestrial, if there is actually an occupied craft that can turn like that, going thousands of miles an hour, and the G-forces in the triple digits or whatever. There are theories on how that can be done, and very interesting. One of them was that I had on a past guest way back, said it was kind of like a falling, like when you're falling, it's sort of like a gravity thing, which is fascinating because if there was actually something in that on our gravity at a right angle turn like that, of course they turn into Jello instantly. So I don't know what that is, but that is an interesting sighting, and you do hear a lot about those right angle turns.
Yeah, and I think most of the people I've talked to who have seen things, that's what it is, and it's just like I didn't think anything of it really until it did that, and then you're like, how can that happen?
Oh, Michael, before I forget, we're coming up on the top of the hour. In the second hour, we'll talk. I think you said that you wanted to actually interview me, type of thing.
Yeah, I would like to ask you some questions for on behalf of the audience. I think people would like to know a little bit more about this Martin guy who comes into our ears every week.
Kind of boring, but okay. But didn't you write a blog about Kecksburg?
Probably.
At some point. I think you did.
Probably.
So the reason I'm bringing that up is I just got a breaking news situation about Kecksburg this evening, and going to have John Ventry, who you talked to, Pennsylvania MUFON director.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he'll be on the show coming up. I'm trying to get him to be on the anniversary, which is the 9th, coming up on December 9th. That is the 50th anniversary of Kecksburg. But you know what? I'm going to pull this up and just read real quickly. This thing, this celebrated thing every year, it's celebrated the anniversary. But basically, I'm going to quote here from John. I was contacted February 2015 by Owen Eichler in regards to his theory that on December 9th, 1965, Kecksburg UFO incident was potentially a crash and retrieval of a GE Mark II re-entry vehicle. Anyway, that launched back on the 7th of December. And this guy spent 10 years researching this and believes that's what it is. And he has answers for everything. The reason it moved the way it moved, the reason it was quickly retrieved. Anyway, they're going to be coming up on the show. I thought that was fascinating. Such a solid case, so many witnesses, and possibly solved after all these years. Actually, 50 years almost on the nose.
Yeah, that actually, I mean, it makes sense. But on the flip side, one wonders why they hadn't fessed up to it by now, and what must have gone very wrong to have that land, in a fairly populated area instead of a nice ocean.
Yeah, a lot of things were going wrong. And early, that was 65. Oh. Yeah. Well, 4 more years we landed on the moon. So I guess I see your point there.
But I mean, definitely something interesting to hear about. I do like when you do have to listen to all of these real world explanations. One of the problems I think with UFO field now is that there are so many people who make definite claims about indefinite things. Will talk to you about the reptilians as if we have their email address and know who they are and can.
Hang on, Michael. We have a call coming in. Hang on.
Oh.
Hello, caller. What's your first name and where are you calling from?
Hi, it's Chris in Pennsylvania.
Hi, Chris.
Forgive me, I'm nervous.
That's all right.
I don't know why I'm nervous all of a sudden, but anyway, the GE Mark II that they're thinking may have been the Kecksburg thing, that was a satellite reconnaissance setup, and that was before digital, so it actually had a film in it. And so when this thing crashed, they wanted to get right out there and get the film canister out of it. They actually used to jettison the film canisters, and they would come down by parachute. And then they would send planes out to actually catch the parachute, the canister, as it fell down. So anyway, they were probably interested in getting to that as soon as they could so they wouldn't lose it.
Yeah,
and they were typically taking pictures of the Russians.
Yes, that's right. There was also a situation with some type of propulsion and possible radioactivity, and that was another reason. I read through this article, but that'll be really good to have John from your state come up in a few weeks and, explain the whole situation. But thank you for that. Did you have a question for the guest, or you just wanted to make that statement?
No, just wanted to mention that, yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
Thanks for the call-in.
Okay.
All right.
See you later.
Happy Thanksgiving. All right. So, so we're right at the top of the hour, Michael. And so that's it for the free part of the show. If you want to listen to the whole show, all you have to do is go to podcastufo.com and right on the top menu bar, sign up. Well, I had an enjoyable time with Michael, and he actually interviews me in the second part of the show. I'm not really used to that, so I went into a little bit of a tirade about something. Anyway, our guest next week is the executive director of MUFON, Jan Harzan. And so we'll be seeing you here next week, and thanks for listening. And remember, keep your eyes to the sky.